You're listening to the Ranch Stewards Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the stewardship and conservation of grasslands, diverse ecological landscapes, and the salt of the earth individuals who dedicate their lives to this endeavor. And now here's your host, Haley Shipp.
Welcome to the Ranch Stewards Podcast on YouTube. 2 years in the making for this podcast, but the first time we've put it on this platform. If you're curious to listen back to previous episodes, we are available on all major podcasting platforms, as well as online at ranchstewards.org. And hey, since you are on YouTube, go ahead, click subscribe. We'd love to add you to our growing community. Today's podcast topic is an honest look at cow size. Are we overestimating or underestimating, and what implications could that have from a ranch perspective? And would you look at that? It's quite handy. I've actually got two ranchers joining us today. We've got Dale Veseth. He is a rancher in South Phillips County, founding member of the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance, as well as Dr. Rachel Endicott. She's a new board member with RSA, as well as a previous beef extension specialist with Montana State University. Now let's get into this discussion.
Thanks, Haley. Well, thanks, everybody. I'm really honored to be a new board member for RSA. It's a group I'm happy to return to, was around and involved in some of its early days, and so it's fun to see how far it's come. So as Haley said, I was the extension beef cattle specialist for Montana State for about 11 years. I grew up in Southwest Montana, just outside of Ennis, on a family ranch where I now live and ranch with my mom and my uncle. Went to Montana State for my bachelor's degree, and then I went to New Mexico State for my master's and my PhD. I'm a nutritionist by training, but I had just as many coursework hours in reproductive physiology as I did in ruminant nutrition. And I got a molecular biology minor while I was at it. So have, an extensive extension background, was in Miles City for half of that time and on campus in Bozeman for the other half, taught a couple of classes, advised a couple of student groups and clubs. And then I moved home in 2018, and I worked for the American Simmental Association for 3 years, particularly in their DNA department and in their publications side of the business. So for sure got an interesting dose of some cow size stuff from a breed association perspective, as well as, being around it all my life from a ranching perspective, and then, research and science and just kind of looking at trends in the industry. So that's me.
So Dale Veseth also with us, founding member for the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance. And Dale, you're no stranger to the spotlight here on the Ranch Stewards Podcast. You've been with us a handful of times now, including in our very first episode. But for folks maybe that don't know Dale Veseth yet, give us a little bit of your background and also your familiarity with this topic of cow size.
Well, I guess it all started, I think my first word was cow, and my first sentence was, "That's a bull." So it's pretty well rooted in there. I grew up on the ranch that I live on now, and I have about 30 years of experience. I did spend about 10 years in academia. I got a bachelor's and a master's degree from Montana State University. During that time, I worked for the Montana Beef Performance Association, which was a nonprofit record-keeping system for ranchers, and actually one of the first ones in the United States. And so I've had a lifelong interest, if you will. When I came back to the ranch, one of my interests was to try to develop a cow that fit our environment up here and minimize our inputs into those cows. And so I've been doing that for about 30 years now. And I do have a real interest in mature size. I've heard the old analogy that the first 15 months of growth are profit, and after 15 months, of age, that's all expense. And I agree with that. And so in trying to find uh, a good efficient cow, I've gone down a lot of rabbit holes, I guess. I'll just end with that, and we can probably get into a few as we talk.
And Dale, I just want to clarify, the first 15 months is the expense, right? And then after that is the profit?
No, the 15
All the way around.
is the profit.
Really?
You're selling your calf, he's growing in the feedlot, that's where all your income comes. And then after that, as you have a mature cow out eating on the range for say 10, 12 years, that's your factory, and that's what is your big cost in ranching.
That's your overhead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I was thinking the other way around with you had to have so much expense before you actually got a calf crop out of somebody. So just a little different line of thinking with it. So, well, this podcast topic came to me some while back. And of course, Dr. Endicott, when I first thought about this, I just thought, I know Rachel's going to have something to say on this. And so I sort of mentioned it to you, and bam, I could tell I hit a nerve because Rachel had a soapbox, but I mean, a very honest, just a very honest perspective on this about if we are not telling ourselves the correct thing, not identifying correct cow size out there, and then also possibly not telling ourselves the right story when it comes to the weight on our bales that we're feeding in the winter, we can get ourselves into a real pickle real quickly. And so I'm going to let you have this opportunity to just really flesh that out a little bit for us about how we have to be realistic, but what we actually have out there on the ground.
Sure. Thanks, Haley. Well, about a little over a year ago now, I spoke at the Next Generation Conference in Shelby. And when that crew got a hold of me, they had seen an article that Daryl Peel had put out talking about how calf crop percentage hasn't really done a lot of movement or improving. It's sort of flattened out and not gotten any better in like the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years, 40 years, I don't know. So the topic was optimizing calf crop. And so I went into a whole bunch of different, analyses and those kinds of things. But one of the things that I really was talking about was this idea of, let's be honest, let's be realistic about what our cows weigh. Because I can tell you as an extension specialist, everybody's cows in Montana weigh 1,200 pounds. And I think that's not true. I think certainly there was probably a time when everybody's cows in Montana weighed 1,200 pounds, but I think that time has long since passed. Are there still herds? Yeah, probably. Dale's probably got some cows that fit more of that kind of type and kind, but by and large, from an industry standpoint, we don't. And I mean, if we stop and we think about it, in the 1960s, carcass weights were like, I don't know, 650, 660 pounds. And now average carcass weights, okay, not top of the mark, but average carcass weights are over 900 pounds. Steer carcass weights have increased like about 4 pounds a year over the last 60 years. Okay, that growth doesn't come with a cow that stays the same size. It just doesn't. One other way that I've looked at this that can kind of, I think is a good visual is, let's say we had a 300 cow outfit in 1975. Okay, so, we have this ranch, we won 300 cows on it in 1975, and those cows weighed 1,100 pounds. Okay, cool. So now we still have a 300 cow outfit. We still run 300 cows on that same piece of ground, but let's say they weigh 14 now. Okay, so 300 1,400 pound cows is the same as about 382 1,100 pound cows. So even though we have a cow herd that's the same numbers, it's like we're running 80 plus more cows on that same ground than we did in 1975 because those cows were bigger. Okay, so what if they were 1,200 pounds in 1975? Cool. All right. If they weigh 1,400 pounds now, that's still 350 1,200-pound cows. Okay. What if, and this is not out, unreal, what if they weigh 1,600 pounds? So 1,600-pound cows is equivalent to 436 1,100-pound cows. And to 400 1,200-pound cows. So I kind of always think about too, what's changed on that ranch since 1975? Do I think that we're better at managing our resources? Yes. Do I think that the capacity of an operation can run that many more cows without more ground? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. And I think accompanying that increase in size has come, increase in performance, right? If we think about what milk production has done since 1975 to now. Okay, and so something that we sometimes fail to remember is that a high milking cow has higher requirements for maintenance even when she's not milking. Even when she's dry, it takes more to feed her. So I think, and I've said this a lot, I think in the industry, people have been saying, oh, we need to moderate. Oh, we need to moderate. Smaller cow size, smaller cow size. Well, at the same time, the packers have been saying, give us more, give us more, give us more. So, those two are in opposition a little bit. But I think, and I mean, just on that production idea. So like in the 1950s, pounds of beef produced per cow is like less than 250 pounds. And now it's in like 2022, I looked, it was over 660. Okay, so that performance comes along with some costs. And so, I mean, if you're, as podcast listeners, I want you to know, I'm not shaming you for how big they are or how small they are. I don't care. My personal opinion, I don't care how much they weigh. I just want you to be honest about it so that you can do the best job of taking care of those cows as possible. Because like Haley said, I think sometimes we also might not be super realistic about what we think we've put in a round bale or a square bale. So I had a former student who was working on a place, and the I don't know if it's the ranch owner or the ranch manager told him that the bales weighed 1,800 pounds and the cows looked like hell. And so I think the bales probably weighed 11 or 12. Okay. So, again, I don't care how much hay you can pack into that round bale, but I want you to take it across the scale. Right. So, thinking that you've got a big fluffy grass bale that you think you can make it weigh 16, hot diggity, how wet did you put it up? But okay, but is it? Because then, I start to have concerns from an animal welfare standpoint. I'm not, there's, running cows tough. And then this is kind of ridiculous, especially if, we're in current really wintry weather conditions that we're in. This is going to be tough on some cows if we're not being accurate about it. So, I guess that's my initial soapbox. I'm sure there will be others.
We've got lots of opportunities. It's our podcast. It's one big soapbox. So Dale, I'm sure as you're hearing Rachel discuss this, your brain's swirling around some thoughts that are similar. Expand a little bit on what's going around in your brain.
Well, I just saw an article in Drovers, and I don't know where they got their data, but they made the comment that cow weight had increased 7 pounds a year since 1978.
I believe that.
And my comment to that is that sounds like it's pretty well correlated with carcass weight, that as we've not necessarily become more efficient, we've just been increasing our factory size, if you will. And so I think that's just something to keep in mind. I guess I don't have any dog in the fight as far as cow size, but I think there are some levels of efficiency, especially in what I'd call restrictive environments. And I believe I live in one. I live in the Missouri River Breaks here in South Phillips County, and we get about 12 inches of rain a year. And that's an average. Um, what I really see and what really concerns me is the fallout that we get from large, heavy milking cows when we get one of those 6-inch years. And so I guess in my breeding program, I'm trying to address that. And so I try to keep my performance in the cattle, but I'm trying to provide moderate mature size and then moderate milk production just to keep that fertility. Because as I went through school, fertility is the main driver of profit on a ranch. And so we can't lose sight of that. And I realized that with all the tools we have now, that we can really put a lot of growth in these cattle with expected progeny differences, et cetera, very quickly. And that growth has, depending on how you select, does have a correlation with mature size. As you get more growthy cattle, they tend to get bigger as they mature. And so I think, just like Rachel's outlined here, I think that we have to try to find some sideboards. We have to find some cattle that can live in our environment and still have a value in today's market.
So Dale, as you're assessing your cattle, how do you best put an educated guess on what their real size is?
We go through and we weigh all the cattle on the ranch every year, from our breeding heifers and our bulls to our mature cow herd. And with that, we give those body condition scores. In the past, we used to frame score the cattle, but I've gone away from that, in that I don't think it's a bad practice, in that we seem to have variation between our technicians, that they seem to be more subjective than our weights and our body condition score. And so I guess I still try to breed for a moderate frame, but we try to find cows that can take care of themselves. And we also go through and do what we call a cow efficiency, and that's taking the adjusted 205-day weight off of her calf and dividing it by the mother's weight. And we will get, traditionally, as you go up in size, mature size, and cow weight, your efficiencies go down. I don't want to tell you that cow efficiency is a total end all, because I see a lot of times my more fleshy cows that come in don't have as good a cow efficiency ratings as some of my thinner cows. And so I think with all tools, we have to kind of watch as we go. We don't want to go too far overboard with any one metric, if you.
Dale, this is all just, we don't do that. I'm not running cows across the scale. I'm not calculating efficiency scores. I mean, you say we within your operation, but explain to us how many people, what goes into that sort of, because this is not just running cows. This is running a business, and you are great at making sure all these pieces make sense. That's not always the case for everyone. So explain the we behind this and how you manage all that information.
Well, I want to say first that it's a real struggle, that I don't want to say that this is an easy undertaking. And we've had a lot of setbacks. I think the first thing that can really help you is bring some professionals in. We've tried to align ourselves with different breed associations for about 15 years. And just my wife and I, we have one neighbor lady that does our record keeping for us, does a very good job. And now we've brought in Allied Genetics as a team. And then we have the crew we work with. And it gets to be quite a group, especially when you start working on bull data. We bring in ultrasound people, we bring in DNA testing people. It's, I guess, the we is, I hate to leave anybody out, is a pretty big team anymore. And I don't see any way around that, because we tried to do it all in-house ourselves, and I just don't have those capabilities. Both Janet and I have a limited experience on computers, and you just have to get some professionals in. So thankfully that there are some out there. And if people are interested, I've got people to call. We have a custom-made book for calving data, and she has a lot of years of experience with that. And then with the, I guess, looking back now, we've gotten EPDs. We're slowly getting the herd entirely. So every individual will have an EPD, but we're going at it through our replacement heifers, our herd bulls. And so it's going to take us 10 years to do it completely. But this is our second year into that process of a 10-year process. And it's already been pretty eye-opening, and we've learned a lot from it. So I'd also comment, we'll probably get in to some of this. We do some ET work and some AI work, some things like that. My comment is for most producers, I think you really want to look at the cost before you jump into those things, because just for average cow calf producer, you have to remember this is an infomercial because I sell bulls, but if you can find a good product is satisfied you working out there, if say you're a $5,000-6,000 bull average I don't think isn't out of line. I usually just start.
Have you seen averages this spring?
I would say that and of course my costs are going up. Part of it is just
All
the
of
beef.
them are.
And the beef, my minimum is 3,000, and they said, well, what fuel's that? And I said, well, the steer calf that you saved going into that is worth 2,000. So now you have 1,000 to work with. And so that's one of the big drivers. But yes, I like all the technologies, and I think they can do wonders for you, but I do caution people that they can get very expensive. So.
Well, as we talk about addressing cow size and what we actually have out there, as I alluded to, we're not running cows across the scale. The only time any of our animals get weighed is when we're shipping them, so we know what our calves are weighing, but it's some indication, and you can watch for any changes that might be happening in your operation if you have big fluctuations there. But so much dependency upon year and weather and all of the things. So, Rachel, as you did your work through extension and your work now being a rancher on the ground, are there any ways that we can estimate cow size without a scale of what we might have going on?
Well, I think you can use that data like you just said. So for sure, you know that you've sent some cull cows, right? So we can, get a pretty good handle, a little bit about that. Um, I think to Dale's point about body condition scoring, that's an important piece, right? So, I mean, ideally, probably we'd have a weight and a body condition score on everybody, and then we'd kind of average them all out to like a body condition score 5 or something, right? So a body condition score is, between 80 and 100 pounds, somewhere in there, every time you go up, like from a 5 to a 6, for example. So that's, useful knowledge. I think, and yeah, I grew up in a seed stock background, so we're a cow calf outfit now, but we weigh every calf at preconditioning. We don't weigh our cows, but we weigh our calves, and then then we take that and look at the cow and say, okay, does this cow, did she fulfill her potential and what I think she should have done for us this year? And I think that helps us some, and I think there's all different levels of management intensity in the cow calf industry, right? And so a lot of it's just going to depend on, how many people you have, how many cows you have, and what sort of work you're willing to put in, and if you think it's worth it. So, I think it's like Dale says, there's lots of different costs involved in a lot of these technologies. And so I think it's up to each individual operation to make those decisions and decide if it's worth it for them. But the more data points that you can collect, the better. The more information you have, it's kind of like, when you call the extension agent and you want them to balance a ration for you, and they say, have you tested any of your hay? And you say no, and then you just use book values. And then you're mad at the extension agent because how the cattle performed is not how the printout said they would, because you get in what you put out, right? This kind of fits the whole industry, really.
And I'll make sure to include the information on body condition score in our show notes on this for anybody that might have a question about what exactly that means, because that's a whole nother tangent that we could go down for a full hour. But let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of cattle size, and then into this discussion about, I know, Dale, you kind of mentioned like matching that cow size to what you're running on. And so 10,000 foot level, Rachel, maybe give us some pros of let's do pros and cons of a larger cow first, and then we'll go into pros and cons of a smaller cow. So we've got a large cow out there. We know that she's probably 1,600 pounds. Why do we have her? Why do we want to kick her to the curb?
Okay, so pros would certainly be that she's probably going to raise a calf that weighs more, right? Whether or not she's efficient about it, like Dale was saying, is up for debate, of course, but with that increased mature size often comes increased growth. So we expect her to wean a heavier calf. The cons would be is that she's going to eat more. And depending on your environment, so Dale's done a really nice job of setting us up for this idea of matching cow type to environment. There's probably a lot of environments in Montana that aren't super friendly to a 1,600 pound cow. Does that mean that she doesn't exist out there? No. But, and it's going to take a lot more to maintain her at 1,600 pounds at a body condition score 5 than if she was 1,400 pounds at a body condition score 5. So, I think the growth is the major pro, and the expensive feed and, how much she's going to eat is the major con.
So now let's go pros and cons for the small. I'm sure it's almost the reverse situation of what you just stated.
Sure. Yeah, so smaller mature size, probably gonna be a smaller weaning weight, but that's not always true. And I think you can do things, if you kind of can attack your weaning weight EPDs and bull selection accordingly, right? If you have a bull that has, if you're selecting cattle that have a higher than average weaning weight and a lower than average or average mature size or yearling weight, that means you're trying to, your idea here is you're going to try to select for something that's early maturing or early growth, right? Early, and that's what you want. But yeah, the smaller cows probably not going to, be able to produce as big of a calf at weaning, but she sure, it's not going to take as much feed to maintain her.
All right, Dale, we're going to switch it over to you now, and matching those pros and cons to your environment, as you just stated. How do you've had years, obviously, to manipulate and finesse this out for your operation. But if you had somebody that was brand new, what would you share with them as far as, here are some of the tactics and the strategies that we've used to identify this at Veseth Cattle Company that I think would be useful for you?
Yeah, I think one of the first strategies that we implemented, we've been at it about 35 years here, is that we have only been, and it depends on the winter. In 2018, you can't get by with protein supplement only because you lose all your cows. And 9 of 10 winters, we go out and we use protein supplement as that's their sole source of nutrients. We have a mineral pack with that, and the cows that seem to thrive in that environment have stayed on. Those that don't are called, either through body condition score or lack of preg status. And so that's one of the things that we implemented early on. The reason we went to that was it was a cost savings. I've tried to think over the years. I'm currently, my protein supplement cost is about $60 now. And that's way up. I think when I started, some of those first years, I was finding some meals and stuff that weren't that popular. I think I was down there in that $12 to $15 range. And so that really reduced our cost on wintering our cattle. You do need to have those grazing acres. They just can't stand there in a dry lot situation and give them their 2 pounds of supplement, every day. So, but I think that was some of the cost savings. We just basically run them like range cows. They're grazed 365 days a year. We have backed off our calving dates. I see that as there again, that's another whole can of worms. But I see in my situation, I can't speak for everyone's, that I really like to breed, get those cows bred late June after they've been on green grass and their body condition scores really improving. But sometimes our springs here, we just have too much death loss. And so I think we've been going in with July 1st. It's kind of a trade-off. We thought that as we pushed our calving date out, and the farther out in the summer those cows are bred, we tended to have cows going downhill conditionally, and we're harder getting bred. But so a lot of it is just trade-offs. Our calving season is basically based on get them as late as we can so we don't lose too many in storms, as early as we can so we can get those cows bred, because we don't want to be trying to breed those cows in late August and September, or we'll have a bunch more dries. And so
I'm having a grin here as you say this, Dale, because I always like to drop in little things about how we do our ranch. And our ranch is so low key compared to so many of the people that we talk to on this podcast. You know, we are large pasture, small herd. We aren't nearly as involved in any of this record keeping, you know, but one of the rules of thumb that we have, which marvelously completely echoes what you're saying, Dale, with your turnout date, is that we know on the 3rd of July, there's a local rodeo, the Hinsdale Rodeo, and we always go out and we have too much fun. So we're not going to turn out bulls on the 4th because we're licking our wounds on the 4th. 4th of July, we might also go have too much fun. So the 5th of July is a maybe for turnout. And if we don't get it done, we'll get it done on the 6th.
Perfect.
You got to balance play and work a little bit.
Yep. Yep.
But coming to the same conclusion as you all. So that's fun. Rachel, do you have any thoughts on this before I kind of go on to the next point of discussion I was going to bring us to?
No, I think, that sums it up. I think, yeah, we could have a whole podcast on body condition scoring. We'd have a whole podcast on when you should calve. I mean, it gets real. People are really emotionally attached to when they calve. And they're also really emotionally attached to when other people calve, and they want to tell you you're dumb for when you do. It's bizarre. It's wild. But I mean, we're March calvers here, and we're in a considerably more southerly location than either of you two. And we're late, right? We're March calvers. Everybody's calving now. February calvers are calving, and it's ugly out there, man. It's not very nice. It's not very nice at all. Not a nice day to be born. So yeah. But if there's any, one hardcore truth here, it's that there is no silver bullet, no matter how much we want there to be one.
Well, and I think that this part of this conversation that can be such a challenge for people in the cattle industry is that it takes a long time before you see the impact of your decisions. If
generation interval is a real bugger.
Yeah. I mean,
when you think about,
go ahead, Rachel.
Pig and chicken people, they can see the fruits of their decisions pretty dang quick. We don't do that. No.
Yeah. How long does it take before one of these management decisions might actually become a reality? And then, of course, you have a drought in between. So who knows? But
I mean, I think 5 years is pretty short. I think that, a lot of the things that we do are kind of a lifelong thing. I think, Dale's probably seeing fruits of his decisions that he made when he first came back to ranch.
If I might address that, it kind of hit home. That comment kind of hit home for me. I actually, on my graduate thesis, I actually went down and looked at mouse data. And the whole reason for that was we were talking a few generations in cattle, 2 or 3, and the mouse data I was looking at was 44 generations. So
wild.
And incidentally, just to throw out, I wasn't looking at it, but they were selecting for mature size in mice, and they got over twice their mature size in those 44 generations. So if you want to push selection for one thing, you can go a long ways.
Yep.
Sorry about getting nerdy there.
That was beautiful. That was excellent. We love that. You know that I'm not going to care
every time. So we're not necessarily talking marketing in this podcast today. And again, another rabbit hole that we could completely find ourselves down. But I mean, you alluded to it, Rachel, earlier on. You were talking about a 1975 scenario. And the first example that you gave was, if we've got 1,400-pound cows today, we could run 300. That's comparable to running 382 1,100-pound cows. And then we look at this U.S. cattle herd number, which is shockingly low right now.
Mhm.
But you also have to look at apples to apples. And it's not, we're not comparing the same animals as we look at that chart if we're simply looking at cattle numbers. So
Right.
I guess both of you maybe speak to that a little bit about the US cow herd is smaller now, but those cows by and large are larger now. Where does the
Mhm.
beef equivalency come? We know we're asking more out of them. So as you already addressed, Rachel, the calf crop percentage hasn't seen improvement that we would hope it would with improved genetics. So I guess, Rachel, why
Mhm.
don't you take first stab at that whole idea, and then Dale will
Sure.
let you kind of follow up.
So I was thinking about that from a, cow herd size difference and beef, pounds of beef produced difference, right? So like, I think cow numbers peaked at like 45.5 million or something in 1975. And I'm not sure now that I say that if that was beef cows and dairy cows or just beef cows. But in 2024, we had 28 million beef cows and like 9.3 million dairy cows. But, we produce like 27 billion pounds of beef. Okay. So, and I think we're slaughtering like 25% less head per year compared to the 70s. And we looked at what carcass weight's doing, right? So like Dale said, when we look at cow weights and carcass weights, they're kind of, moving together. And I do think there are probably some other efficiencies that we have picked up just from technologies like, I don't know, implants, better feeding technology, better feeding knowledge, better feeding management. We probably can flake corn better than we could in the 70s, from a feedlot perspective. So I think there are some, way less cows, but way more beef. So, I think that is a positive for us. But I don't know, I think it'd be interesting to kind of take a look at that, Haley, and see. But, I think we probably say a lot that yeah, we're just so much more efficient. We have way fewer cows and way more beef, but we never in that discussion say, and the cows weigh 300 pounds or 400 pounds more than they did. So that's
We like
a
to get
big
our
piece of it.
attaboys and
We
our
do.
attagirls.
We do. Gotta pat ourselves on the back at any opportunity.
Yeah. Dale, part of your business as well is doing, marketing beef beyond just marketing calves and bulls. You deal in this actual, product of beef to consumer too. So weigh in a little bit on this discussion about having arguably as much beef out there, or, looking at the numbers that the small cattle herd is not as much of a dire statistic as it would have been if we were comparing the same things.
In my mind, I think we're comparing apples to oranges. And I guess we're actually raising more beef today than we did. I guess my concern is efficiency. What I'm trying to do for my ranch and my customers is produce more and better product on the on a standard resource base. And so I guess that's why I've dived into weighing all these cows, getting body condition scores on them. All that is try to get at efficiency a little bit. And I think there is opportunities out there. We see quite a little variation in our feed to gain between different types of cattle, et cetera. And I guess that's where I've been trying to go on, is produce cattle that still have performance, but put some kind of upper level so that I don't get calls from my customers in that 6-inch year and say, well, we have a 50% breed up this year. What went wrong? And I'm not sure that I have all the answers for that, but I guess that's the situation that I'm trying to work on. And that's by moderating size and then my production levels, especially in milk.
Mhm.
Well, I think as we kind of wrap this discussion up today, and Rachel and Dale, I knew you guys would be the right ones to talk to about this, and my brain's whirling with other ideas. And down to, I just read an article recently that was talking about food waste. Food waste now that we've got so many GLP-1 users out there for weight loss reasons, and they aren't eating as much as the population previously was. And so I'm wondering now, will GLP-1s have an impact on like the size of a steak we're asking people to produce? For a long time, we wanted these huge 16-ounce sirloins, to serve in restaurants. And are we going to get to more petite cuts now? And so my brain just swirls all over the place, and we can take it a wild ride, or we can focus. That's what I have to do in life. So as we focus on rounding out this conversation, I think, Rachel, one of the key things for the producer that I want to just harp on from what you said is, if we're going to overestimate our bale size and we're going to underestimate our cow size, we are going to end up in an animal welfare situation. And of course, that's horrible to look at just from folks that care about livestock, but also that spells disaster for a ranch, and that is not sustainable. So
Correct.
just kind of bring that home for us, that this is a
Sure.
very real situation.
Absolutely. And I mean, even that's the worst case scenario, right? That's like, I think my bales weigh 1,800 pounds and I think my cows weigh 1,200 pounds, but my bales weigh 1,200 pounds and my cows weigh 1,800 pounds, right? So that would be worst case scenario. And so there's also it's going to be a spectrum, just like anything else, right? So if you're only, underestimating or overestimating a little bit, how much of your open cow rate is due to those cows being too thin because you didn't feed them enough hay? If anything, I think Dale and I have probably convinced you that there's like cause and effect is not simple in the cattle industry, right? There's rippling effects of any kind of decision that we make. And so, I think underlining that idea that Dale mentioned earlier is that repro is more important than anything else. It's way more important than growth if you sell your calves at weaning. And so, I always said that I had job security and extension until people started to talk about pounds of calf weaned per cow exposed at the coffee shop instead of just weaning weights. And I left extension and still had job security, and still would, right? So, that repro piece is really critical because we can't do anything about calf crop percent if we don't have a calf conceived and born, right? So I think, just be honest with yourself, if nobody else, right? You don't have to tell your neighbor what they weigh, but just feed them accordingly, right? So that's my main advice, is that, again, I'm not shaming you. I don't care. I just want you to be honest with yourself about it, because I think we're not good stewards of a cow herd if we're not realistic about it.
And Dale, I think the take home from your discussion is that it doesn't matter if your cow is big or your cow is small, or you're calving in January or you're calving in June. It's got to work for your system, and you've got to have reasons to back that up. And so I don't think we're all going to get quite to the point of the data is king, as Dale is. That is just bar none. I mean, the holy grail, what we can all strive to. But don't beat yourself up if you're listening and you're thinking, I am not there. Many folks will never get there. But Dale, kind of answer to that, it depends mentality for making sure that we've got these cows matching our systems.
Well, I think the one of the messages I want to leave with is, I think we can make progress there. That most of the breed associations are taking mature weights now, and we're starting to see, we've got some data that came out of the Meat and Animal Research Center here a couple of years ago. We've got we've got variation in our herd out there, I think we can make some good progress. That part of it is recognizing that we might have a problem and then addressing it. And so I think there's going to be more tools out there. From what I've seen in my operation, I've been able to moderate my size some and still maintain performance. I just think it's a new level to work on. I guess my comment is, I always go back to the old adage, if you don't measure it or you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so that's the first thing I realize I'm a stickler there, but the more data that you can collect and be able to analyze, the better off you are. And everybody, I talk to grazing systems with a lot of people, and my comment is everybody starts somewhere. You just have to take those steps. And of course, the quicker those steps come, maybe the more progress you'll see. Maybe not, but
Dale, not going to take any excuses on this one. Remember, if you enjoyed today's podcast and want to catch some of our previous episodes, just head to ranchstewards.org or look up the Ranch Stewards Podcast on all major podcast platforms.
You've been listening to the Ranch Stewards Podcast, a project of the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance. If you like what you heard, head to ranchstewards.org for added content, or follow the Ranchers Stewardship Alliance on Facebook and Instagram.